show with you is we have one of the leading technical consultant experts in the accounting industry, Randy Johnston with K2 Enterprises. For those who don't know, Randy is one of the 2004 through 2024 Accounting Today's top 100 most influential people, top 25 thought leaders in the accounting industry from 2011 through 2024, inducted into the CPA Practice Advisor Accounting Hall of Fame in 2011, has started his own multiple businesses, including K2 Enterprises, taught technology at many universities and many colleges, including Huntington Community College, James Madison University, Western Washington University, and the University of Central Oklahoma. Over 40 years of management and technology consulting experience in technology and the accounting industry. Welcome, Randy. What is a WISP, and how should firms consider when creating and maintaining their own WISP internally?
Well, Chris, this is a required document, Written Information Security Plan. Now, this has been required for some time, but this was really codified in IRS pubs. And yeah, I know your listeners will be with this. All the numbers, it sounds like number soup. It's a 5293, which is supported by 1345, which is also further supported by 4557 and 5708, and it is part following the NIST standards and the FTC safeguard rules. So that's a whole lot of numbers. Most of the time, people just refer to it as 5293 or 4557, but all of those documents come into play. And there are very specific requirements and some very specific examples available.
And I think some of those examples are available even online with IRS's website. There's a template for them to download.
There is, and there's templates from a variety of sources, but that 5708 number is a pretty solid template. It's been updated 3 or 4 times since its inception, and the latest version of it is very straightforward. Now, Chris, on this, the listeners need to be a little aware of this. You should create a WISP that fits your size and needs. It's kind of like the three bears: too large, too small, just right. The deal is you got to think about what size firm you are and how complex it is. If you're a great big firm, you need a great big plan. If you're a little tiny firm, a little tiny plan will do just great. And so just be aware that you want to do enough, but not too much, not too little. And that's why the 5708 plan is actually a great starting point. Now, one other piece of, I'll call it minor guidance. You can buy these plans for a few $100s from different sources, and you pretty much get what you pay for. I have not seen a single pay for plan that I can say, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's what you ought to do. There are providers these plans out there, but by and large, you're much better off using the publicly available plan from the IRS, and I think you'll be pretty happy with what you get there.
Lots of paperwork, lots of documentation, and it's something that every firm that does taxes for other people, organizations needs to take seriously and get done. What about FTC safeguards? And we know the rule is not new. It's been around for several years, but it seems that recently, as probably because the enforcement went into place in June 9th of 2023, a lot of firms are taking it seriously now. Can you provide a brief overview of the FTC safeguard rule and some pointers you can give firms that still are working on their FTC compliance?
Yeah, and this one is one where, as a firm, you can't ignore this. I am aware of firms that have already received fines. Now, what are the fine levels that you just cited, Chris, that started June 9th of 2023? First, it's up to 100,000 or imprisonment for each violation. And beyond that, the officers or partners or directors are each personally liable for $10,000 for each violation. Now, FTC safeguard rule that came in with Graham Leach Bliley. That's been around for a long time. But basically, if you do any tax work, you're classified as a financial institution under Graham Leach Bliley, which is why you have to comply. So there was some confusion about that. There was some confusion about how many tax returns we had to do and how many identities we had in play. But fundamentally, my attitude around it is if you do any tax work, if you have a PTIN or an EFIN, you need to have a WISP. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing, well, it probably does matter if you're only doing 10. But if you're doing any serious tax preparation work at all, or any audit work, for example, employee pension benefit plans, where you've got a lot of client information, that actually also falls into this.
And I think there's perhaps some misunderstandings that some firms believe if they have under 5,000 customers, somehow this is not applicable. I think they forgot at the bottom of the paperwork of the guidelines. Can you expand a little bit more about how it relates to customer and also what defines a customer, if it's even clear?
Yeah, it's not super clear, but the interpretations that I've seen basically say that if you are dealing with a business entity, all of their employees count in your number. And this is very obvious when you start going back, like I cited earlier, the employee pension benefit plans, because if you're doing an audit of that type of work, you have all of those identities at risk. Or let's go to another area, client accounting services. If you're running the books, if you're doing, the financials, and you happen to be doing payroll for that particular entity, all of those people are covered. So a better way to think about it is how many federal IDs or social security numbers do I have in my entire firm? So it's not about the clients, active or inactive. It's how many of those numbers do I have? And I think even the smallest of firms quickly get beyond the 5,000 bar.
And I think it's important to remember that every firm that is doing tax for outside individuals, this rule applies to them. It's just whether or not they have to go above and beyond with the 5,000 plus customers. It seems this year, especially in 2023, security and compliance have been really hot topics. I haven't really heard as much traffic about those as I have. Maybe it's just the industry self-writing itself. Um, Specifically evaluating data and access points, what should firms prioritize? Eliminating admin users on their networks? I mean, what can you guide them on some best practices?
Well, Chris, there's a number of things that I know you and I agree on just because of the technical risk. But the Pub 4557 is very specific about 12 steps that all firms should be taking. And number one of those 12s is taking basic security steps. And in that one tenet alone, that covers things like the phishing emails, like the requirement to have the WISP, uh, reviewing internal controls for anti-malware, password formats, having backup, wiping old computer drives, limiting access to data, checking EFINs and PTINs on a weekly basis during tax season, withdrawing power of attorney from clients that you're no longer servicing, that any data losses that you have are reported to the IRS stakeholder liaison, and that you're educating clients on the use of PINs and any of the FTC safeguard security tips. Now, that's just one all by itself. That I'm not even getting to number 2 through 12 when I talk like that. And Chris, this year we are noticing far more aggressive security attacks. We think these are enabled by AI, and we think the bad actors are able to create far greater effectiveness in phishing and other attacks like that. And so in this year, I've actually had to deal with more firms that have had security breaches than in any other past year. And that's pretty interesting to me. And sometimes the attacks are through those admin passwords. One of the greatest regrets I have as a technician historically is that I didn't teach everybody who uses Windows to immediately set up a second user ID and not use the local admin password. Now we kind of did that early on, Chris, because bloody Intuit QuickBooks Desktop required the use of the local admin. And so a lot of firms kind of got in that habit historically, and it just shouldn't be that way. You know, his granddaughter out in New York City says, Grandpa, that not be the plan. You just shouldn't be using administrative rights on local passwords or local workstations as an example. So again, there's lots of other security twists that we could talk about here, but the bottom line, those are fairly well laid out inside the 5708 document to help you create your WISP.
And I suppose the one silver lining out of all these regulations, whether it be the WISP, the FTC, or your cyber insurance plan, or just practicing cybersecurity best practices, a lot of this is overlapping. A lot of this is complementing the other. And at the end of the day, the business owner operator should have some added level of security and a little bit more peace of mind knowing that, they're minimizing the potential risk, wouldn't you say?
Yes, as a matter of fact, a lot of these things do overlap. A lot of them are, I would say, common sense, but unfortunately, so many firms haven't spent enough on their security, just
Mhm.
like a lot of hospitals didn't, or a lot of governmental entities didn't. They just kind of took the attitude, I don't think we'll ever be touched. But it turns out, um, CPA firms, law firms, banks, those are all very target rich environments. And we have to have those security things in play. You mentioned cybersecurity insurance or that type of policy. And many of those policies now require multi-factor authentication, which I think both of us have been recommending for 15 plus years. And it turns out that if you don't have it, they won't even issue the policy. Further, we're seeing the amounts of the policies and the covered events being restricted pretty notably. So I'm beginning to see that the cybersecurity insurance policies actually aren't as robust as they used to be. They're more expensive than they used to be. They basically just cover less.
I do want to bring up while we're recording, I do want to ask you one question that that we get a lot, is, and it relates to two-factor fatigue, as they call it.
Mhm.
What would you say to a firm that is experiencing two-factor fatigue between all the different apps and having to log in many different times?
Yeah, and I do despise wasting productivity from having to log into all sorts of things. But now I reflect on multi-factor authentication and recognize right now it's among our best defenses in terms of protection. We expect over time we'll get to a passwordless environment, but we already know that, for example, single sign-on has been compromised to pass through credentials from one entity to another. So as much as we'd like to be one and done, I don't think that's exactly the way it's going to work out. Beyond that, I think that some of the larger publishers have misinterpreted IRS regulations trying to uh, force login every 30 minutes or so. That's not what the IRS regs said at all, but a lot of our publishers in the profession, said, oh, we're just going to force you to log in every 30 minutes no matter what. So the bottom line is try to make the login process, even with multi-factor authentication, as seamless as you can, and don't try to make the time frames too short because a lot of your people are going to be at their desks, and as long as they're at their desk working, I have a little less fear. I'm old school on this one, Chris. If you get up and walk away, I was an old control delete lock the console as you walk away. But in most firms we don't have tons of exposure. So I hope I got to the heart of the question you were asking.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the bottom line is that two-factor is a roadblock, and that sometimes that's the roadblock between, compromising yourself possibly and a cyber attack, versus the inconvenience. One thing somebody once told me when I used to work for drug enforcement is there's nothing convenient about security, and that is the truth.
That is absolutely the truth. In fact, it is always a balancing game between, security and ease of use. And if it's too easy to use, it's easy to use for the bad guys too. and the bad actors are going to get in there and take advantage of your firm and or your client. And I don't think you want that on your firm's reputation, and you don't want that on your firm's cyber insurance policy.
Well, Randy, thank you so much. Thank you for joining today's Coffee Talk and sharing your expertise on this topic. And for those who are still with us, thank you for joining us today. We hope you learned something new and will help you and your firm improve your processes. And if you still want to get more information and tips and best practices, reach out to Randy directly and from the experts, and subscribe to our channel for more videos and news. Cheers.